I got to tell you this story before we get started.
I've been looking forward to this. Go ahead.
I mean, a while ago, I noticed that there was like a couple of birds building a nest like right by our front door. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of fun, you know. And so I didn't know what kind of birds they were. So I used Google Lens and took a picture and Googled it and found out that they're barn swallows. So like they're, you know, birds that very often like build nests on barns and other.
So they're lost, is what you're saying.
Yeah, they're the birds like typically like build nests on man-made structures. That's like what they do, and you know, hence the name, you know, barns or whatever. And like it was kind of did some research and found out like, oh, that's kind of fun. Like they mate for life, and they're like, if you leave the nest alone, they'll come back every year and do that. I'm like, oh, that'd be kind of neat. I even gave them names. You know, I was like, I did this because I thought it was fun. But now I hate these birds. And I'll tell you why.
So wait. What are their names?
Their names are Fred and Wilma. Yeah, I named them Fred and Wilma. And like all the babies have hatched now, so they're like little cheapy birds, which is like doesn't really bother me or whatever. The thing that annoys the piss out of me right now is that, you know, they're animals, they're defending their home. Every time I walk out of my front door, I get dive bombed by birds. Every time. And like, because Fred and Wilma, they'll take off and they'll start, you know, cheeping and calling their friends. Then out of nowhere, like 8 other birds show up, and I'm just trying to get in my car.
They call the entire cast of the Flintstones.
They do, yeah.
To dive bomb you.
Yeah, you know, Barney and Betty, and then Mr. Slate. They'd all just come flying at me, and all of a sudden they'll just start dive bombing at my head, and like, I don't always like look at them and watch them come at me, but I can always tell whenever there's one close to my head because they make a different sound. Like they normally just like cheep, cheep, cheep. When they're like close to your head, they goes meep, and then like they'll do that and then fly away. And then so like I have straight up watched birds come at my face, just like whoosh, right at me, and they'll turn away like the last second or whatever. And I was like, it got to the point where I had to go in and out of the house a lot at one point, and it happened every single time. It got to the point I just took an umbrella out there with me and just started swinging it at them to get them to keep them away from trying to dive bomb my head. It didn't work. Actually, what did work is when I opened the umbrella and just held it over me, I looked bigger, so they didn't want to attack me. I also, like, Suki came outside with me, my dog, and they started diving at Suki too. Yeah. It has not been fun. I hate it.
So you have to be Mary Poppins now to get in and out of your house.
I feel like it. Or like Snow White, I can walk outside and whistle, and they would just go. Like, if they could do something useful, like hang my laundry, I'd be really thankful. But like, just them hanging around. I hate these freaking birds, man. I'm so annoyed. I'm ready for them to leave. Well, once these babies are gone, that nest is coming down. Like, I can't deal with those right now.
Hello and welcome to It's the Greatest Show, Man, the show where we talk about the musicals you love and why they're great and why they suck. I'm your host, Emily Chavone, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Brantley Wheeler.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, how's it going?
It's going.
Good. Great.
I'm already out of breath.
You're already out of breath? Great. It's been a long time, feels like. But to be fair, it always feels like a long time.
A long time since we recorded? Or?
Yes. Every time it feels like we record, it feels like it's been too long.
It feels like we've been sitting here for a long time.
Well.
A 60-minute episode is like 3 hours of us talking.
That's true, yeah. Oh, the stuff that gets left on the floor, you know?
Dear listeners, if you only knew.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. What show are we talking about today?
Okay, so today we are talking about our first... Is it our first adaptation?
Every musical's an adaptation. It's our first Disney.
It's our first Disney, yeah. And we decided to go ahead and do this one, I think because it happened around here recently, right? It's kind of, I think, well, that and there's some kind of bigger ones we decided to kind of put off for a little while. But this is the one that we kind of went with. We just kind of picked one in the middle, and this is what we're going with. So today we're talking about the Little Mermaid Broadway adaptation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In case you, for some reason, have not heard of The Little Mermaid.
Right. I mean, honestly, people of our generation...
Why are you here?
People of our generation, we literally grew up watching this movie. There's no way we haven't.
It is, well, this came out the same year you were born, right? This is older than me. The Little Mermaid is a stage adaptation of the 1989 Disney film of the same name, which is based on the fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. They had an out-of-town tryout in Denver in 2007, and then opened on Broadway January of 2008, closed August of 2009 after 685 performances. Music by Alan Menken, lyrics by Howard Ashman and Glenn Slater, and book by Doug Wright. And according to Playbill, in the year of our Lord 2023, it was tied for the 5th most popular musical produced by high schools. It was actually tied with Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, look at there.
Yeah.
Great. I know for a fact, too, that Little Mermaid, I believe, is the 6th major film adaptation that Disney's made into a Broadway musical. The first one being Beauty and the Beast back in, 94. And then Lion King was 97, which was really soon after the original movie, which I think the movie came out in 95. The original Lion King was 95, and then the Broadway show was 96, really soon after that. And then it was Hunchback, but Hunchback really only opened in Germany in 99. And then after that was Tarzan, and then Mary Poppins, and then Little Mermaid.
Okay, I'm gonna make a correction now so that I just imagine the comments coming in.
Okay.
Disney's Beauty and the Beast was 91. The movie was 91.
Uh-huh.
The stage show came out in 94.
Uh-huh.
The Lion King, the movie's 94.
Oh,
the stage
okay.
show was 97.
So that was my
still,
bad.
I
was close. I said 95.
Still pretty quick for Broadway productions of that
Yeah,
scale.
for sure. And it's still going. Lion King is still running.
Yes. We'll talk about that someday, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I'll look forward to that one. But anyway, so yeah, Little Mermaid. Weirdly enough, as popular as the movie is, this show did not run that long.
I think it did pretty well, and then it was closed in 2009 because they were coming into the fall season and they were afraid they were going to lose money. So rather than start to lose money, they just preemptively closed it.
Oh, sure. Okay, whatever. I mean, Disney is a business, and Disney Theatrical is a branch of that business, so...
That's true. They were also gearing up for Aladdin at that point. So.
Right, yeah. Well, Newsies is right after that, so Newsies, I think...
Oh, yeah, Newsies is in there, too.
Yeah, Newsies was right after Little Mermaid. Newsies was 2012.
I guess Aladdin didn't get to Broadway
2014.
until 2013, did it? 12 or 13, something like that.
It opened officially on March 20th, 2014.
2014?
Yeah, it was in previews. I think it started previews in 13 and then opened officially in 14.
Man, I'm old.
Aladdin's been around for a bit too.
I saw that with the Broadway cast. Anyway, The Little Mermaid.
Yeah, Little Mermaid. Enough about Disney. Let's talk about Little Mermaid.
We said we'd pick one Disney show per season, and we're going to talk about every Disney show today.
Yep.
This is a 4-hour episode.
All right, here we go.
Buckle in.
Here we go. Cracking my knuckles. All right, no. Okay, so...
I have a summary of The Little Mermaid.
Sure. Yeah, go for your summary, and then we can kind of break down things.
I do want to say that I was very excited to talk about this, and I have seen the musical before, and I am not super familiar with it, but familiar enough that I felt like this was going to be a show that I was excited about. And hopefully by now we all know my brand. So here's my summary. In case you've never seen The Little Mermaid. Act 1. Ariel is a mermaid, the youngest daughter of the Sea King Triton, and totally obsessed with human culture to the point of being a shipwreck grave robber. Her best friend is a fish called Flounder, who's totally friend-zoned but still does whatever she wants, including visiting a seagull named Scuttle at the surface who incorrectly tells Ariel about all the human treasures she collects. Ariel catches a glimpse of Prince Eric and his crew sailing the open seas, and in true Disney fashion, falls immediately in love and decides she has to become a human. King Triton finds her human artifact collection and is enraged because Ariel's mother was killed by fishermen, probably, ? He destroys all her stuff, forbids any more surface trips, and tells the court composer Sebastian the Crab to keep an eye on her. Ariel, being a typical spoiled youngest child teenager, goes to her Aunt Ursula, the infamous sea witch, where she trades her voice for a human body with the stipulation that she must get Eric to kiss her within 3 days or Ursula keeps her voice and soul forever. Act 2. Eric talks to Ariel / himself for 3 days. She turns into a mermaid again temporarily. Ursula is defeated in 3 seconds. Triton stops being a xenophobe, and everyone lives happily ever after. Oh yeah, and Le Poisson.
Oh yeah, and the song about fish.
Which might be the best song in the show.
It's great. We'll talk about it. But first, I think we should also acknowledge the original cast because listening to the soundtrack, they're all great. You know,
It's stacked.
It's stacked. And Sierra Boggess, this is like her Broadway debut. Is this show?
It was, yeah.
Which is pretty great, and she's fantastic. She's it's, I mean, what a debut, honestly, to be this character in a Disney show. One of the most beloved Disney princesses of all time, and then you get to play that for real in real life. That's just pretty cool.
Well, and you know they found her because she was Christine in Phantom in Vegas.
I did not know that, but that's cool.
Yeah,
that's
she was doing that. So she was established and like was a talented, established performer. She just hadn't
been on Broadway.
Been on Broadway.
Right. Okay. So there's that, and then we have Sherry Renee Scott as Ursula.
I love her. Always solid.
Always going to be great there. Very different than Pat Carroll, but I'm not mad about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We had Sean Palmer was Prince Eric. King Triton was Norm Lewis. Sebastian was the incomparable Titus Burgess, probably my favorite character in this show and my favorite actor to come out of this show. I know this
and
probably wasn't
our Dreamcast regular.
Yeah, Titus Burgess for sure. For sure. I love him so much. And then we had Eddie Korbick as Scuttle, Jonathan Freeman as Grimsby, which is really fun because Jonathan Freeman, in case you did not know this, is the original voice of Jafar in the animated Aladdin, and also played Jafar in the original Aladdin production.
On Broadway.
Yeah, on Broadway, exactly. Yeah,
that was super cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool that he got to do that, because there's not a lot of these voice actors who get to reprise a role like that in a live adaptation. Mm-hmm. And then to kind of round out the rest of the featured cast, Tyler Maynard as Flotsam, Derek Baskin as Jetsam, Chef Louis was John Tracy Egan, and Flounder is played by a nice handful of young boys. Trevor Braun, Brian DiAdrio, Cody Hanford, and J.J. Singleton were all in the Flounder group, because you know how the way that Broadway works with children is they have multiple people playing that part at different times, different days, to give them breaks. So, but either way, it's a great cast for this show. I'll say this: Disney knows what they're doing when it comes to these kind of things. I think that like Disney theatrical is a kind of its own thing, and when they let them take care of things, it usually turns out pretty well.
Yes, agreed. So
like, not mad about it. Okay, so if we just start from the top of the show, right?
Sure.
So I have only seen. I never got to see the Broadway production. I only ever saw like amateur productions of it, which is fine, but knowing the difference between what was rewritten or changed from the Broadway production to the licensed production, which is a pretty common thing. It's not that weird that happens all the time. I can think of a handful of shows I know for sure that have been changed, but with this show specifically, I really don't. I'll get to it. There's a particular song I do not like that they changed, but I didn't realize that the show started with Ariel singing. I thought it just went into Fathoms Below as it did in the movie.
I wish it did.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I think there are too many songs, which I don't know if I've ever said about a musical before.
That's a hot take.
I think there are too many songs in the stage version.
Well, I mean, thinking about like the original animated production, there are quite a few. I mean, it definitely has more songs than some of the other Disney quote unquote musicals. I'm looking at you, Mulan, with your 3 songs or whatever.
Hey.
Not a musical. Mulan's great. I just don't think it's a musical.
We like Mulan.
I love Mulan. Don't get me wrong. I love that song, and the songs are great, but there's not very many. Anyway, as opposed to like this show has like a bunch, already,
yeah.
And then they added more from the Broadway show.
I in my research, I think I saw somewhere that when the movie was first in talks, they had Alan Menken and Howard Ashman had really pitched that they wanted it to be more like a Broadway musical,
okay, and
kind of follow that structure where the songs were really integrated in the plot. And I mean, they were already successful musical theater composers at that point. Mm-hmm. So I think The Little Mermaid does a really good job of incorporating lots of like meaningful integrated songs.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And so then to be like, oh yeah, well now we need to make it more than 90 minutes because it's a stage show. I think it could have been a tight 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
and it's like 2:20, and it feels every second of that 2:20.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
It's long.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it was about 2:20. But I really like the one like I didn't really pick up on this until like later on, just because honestly I have been revisiting some Gilbert and Sullivan recently, and Fathoms Below to me sounds a lot like Pirates of Penzance. Maybe just because it's the piratey kind of tune that a lot of people kind of put with that, but I was getting Gilbert and Sullivan vibes from Fathoms Below now as like re-listening to it.
I didn't think of that, but yeah, that and Alan Menken's sea shanty would be Gilbert and Sullivan, wouldn't it?
I don't know how much of that we can use. Yeah, just it very much comes off as like it's very Gilbert and Sullivan, this kind of sound, which is cool because it's like an homage to those kind of older Broadway shows. I love all of the added harmonies that in pretty much every song that they've put in the show, that they've reorchestrated or rearranged things to where there's a lot more harmonies, but you hear it really, really well in Daughters of Triton because they all kind of sing in unison and then they split into harmony, and you're like, oh, that's good though. That's really good, and I like it a lot. And they extended that song a bit too, to it's not just like a 30-second number; it's an actual full number. And I like it a lot more. I like the change. I do say that I do like some of the changes. I don't like all of the changes to the show. But that is one change specifically that I really, really enjoy. Also, I was kind of like thinking about it later on. I was really surprised at how much Sierra Boggess sounded like Jodie Benson when she was singing until she like started belting. When she belts, she sounds like Sierra Boggess. But when like up to that point, she sounded like almost like kind of like I was like doing some work as I'm listening to the music, and it just really surprised me how much she sounded like Jodie Benson, which I thought was really cool, and obviously was like probably an intentional casting choice, or she's changing her voice to sound more like Jodie Benson, which also is a possibility. I'm not sure, but I just thought that was really cool, and like it really stuck out to me. When she sang the first original song, "The World Above," right? That stuck out to me, like how much she sounded like what I would quote unquote think Ariel would sound like. But yeah, the harmonies that have been added though, they elevate all this. Like, there's a lot of good songs from the original movie that they put in the show, but it just elevates them so much more, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a Broadway thing.
Yeah, I know, but still. Do you have any comments about anything so far? Because I'll just keep talking.
You can keep going. I mean, I'm looking at like the Broadway cast recording track list, and I'm trying to remember what The World Above sounds like. It's gone from my brain. But then you have Human Stuff and I Want the Good Times Back, neither of which is in the license, like the production you can license today.
Yeah, which is a bummer because I think Human Stuff is really fun. It just is a fun song. I mean, I get cutting it because there's not a song. There's like that song technically isn't in. I mean, it's not in the movie that it's based on, right? But I mean, I kind of liked it, and it kind of establishes Scuttle a little bit more, and kind of gives the other seagulls are just kind of also there. So it kind of establishes that a little more. So it's not really later on a surprise when they do a different song.
Here's what I think happened. I don't know this for sure. But here's what I think happened. I was watching an interview with Derek Baskin, who was the original Jetsam, and who you probably know from other things like Memphis and Ain't Too Proud. Right? He's an amazing performer. Apparently, he was originally auditioning for Sebastian. And I believe in the interview it said that it was basically down to he and Titus Burgess. And obviously we know he didn't get cast as Sebastian, but they offered him, they were like, we really like you. We have this other part for you. And Flotsam and Jetsam were apparently much bigger roles in Denver.
Really?
Yes, and I believe I don't know for sure, but I believe that Scuttle was probably also a much bigger role. And the problem was people liked Scuttle and Flotsam and Jetsam too much that we forgot about Ariel. That's what they said, was that Flotsam and Jetsam were just so well liked by the audience that it was detracting from the rest of the show, so they had to cut things. And so I think the same thing probably happened with Scuttle, where everyone's like, oh, a couple of numbers that aren't like dramatic lovey ballads, that part was so fun, and their costumes are really cool. And so I think they just like pulled the audience in so much that from a directing standpoint, it had to be pulled back. And so I suspect that's why part of why that Scuttle song is cut, because there are so many songs in the show. What's one more?
That's kind of true.
There's so many. And so I think that song really didn't do anything that a couple of lines of dialogue couldn't do.
Sure.
Which is consistent with the rest of the show. I think there are a lot of I'm gonna come in so negative right off the top. I think there's too many scene changes, and that's part of why, like, the biggest problem with this show is pacing.
Mm-hmm.
There's too many scene changes, and I think some of those things could be combined. Like, there are moments where there's a moment where Triton and Sebastian, and maybe someone else is on stage too, and they're on stage for like 3 lines.
Are you thinking about... Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Is that after Part of Your World?
No, I think I know what you're talking about. Is it the World Above reprise? That one?
Maybe.
Because it's right after... It's after her voice, which I'll get back to. But it's after her voice, and then King Triton is like, "Oh, the world above is bad," or da 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 da, and then like it's over, and then like because right before the Prince Eric song is "She's in Love," which is the sisters, and then Eric comes out and he sings her voice, and then we go back to King Triton after that, and then after that is Under the Sea. So like it's not as like not a crazy transition there, but going from like underwater to the surface back to underwater like that quickly is a huge pain.
And it works great in a movie when you can draw whatever background you want and it changes instantaneously. Mm-hmm. But when you have this huge elaborate ship, because I've never seen a production of The Little Mermaid that doesn't have a huge elaborate ship,
right?
And it takes 20 seconds to wheel that thing out on stage. Like, you are slowing everything down by going back and forth and back and forth. Like, I think some of these scenes could have been combined. For sure.
And, I'm, like, thinking about it, too. One of the amateur productions that I saw, like, there's a lot of transition music written into the show. Mm-hmm. But one of the, like, they would always set King Triton's, like, throne, like, center stage, like, up center, which is also where the ship was. So like they'd be underwater for She's in Love, and they had like the different seashells that those sisters were in. They had to wheel those off stage, wheel the ship back in, and do her voice, and then wheel the ship back out, and then put Triton's throne back center, and then take it out to do Under the Sea. And I'm like, that's a lot of moving. There's gotta be a way to condense all this so that we're not doing this much shifting. Like maybe like you pull this one scene like further downstage so that you're kind of you can be changing things in the back, but this just comes out and sits here, then goes away, and like there's got to be a way to do something.
That's what I was just gonna say. I wonder if this comes from this like the old Broadway idea of like close the Traveler and have a small scene in front while you're resetting the main set, like let the shift happen behind the Traveler. If you have a relatively downstage Traveler. But, I mean, I get that a lot of this show is the spectacle.
As is every Disney show.
Right. Like, if you're just going to close a black Traveler and have Ariel and Flounder stand in front of it and then lose all of the environment.
No, I'd put a blue Traveler.
Well.
They're underwater, Siobhan. Put a blue Traveler. But I also...
Do you have a blue Traveler?
No, and I wouldn't want to change it out for a blue one either.
That's what I'm saying. My high school had a blue Traveler.
Was your school colors blue?
Blue and silver.
Yeah, well, that makes sense then, doesn't it? Our school colors are blue and gold. And our Traveler's red, so what does that mean? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Wait, the PAX Traveler's red?
Yeah.
The Grand is red.
Oh, the Travelers are all black.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Oh, well. I'm thinking of the Grand.
Oh, yeah. No, I wouldn't. You don't close the Grand except at Acts, which is why we call it the Act Curtain.
Right. Whatever.
Anyway. This is what we debate on as a production.
Whatever. That's true, yes. And also shut up. Okay, so...
It's okay. Don't move the scrim. I got thoughts for our next one.
I already moved it. Anyway.
Well, have fun moving
So, the original song in the Broadway show, Ursula's first song, I Want the Good Times Back. That song is also fun.
Tell me your thoughts on this.
I hate that they changed it.
Me too.
Don't like the new one. What did they change it to? The new song is called
Daddy's
Little Angel. I don't like that song. It's not good. I don't like it at all. It is it supposed to make us like sympathize with Ursula? Because you shouldn't. But almost like I Want the Good Times Back is so good because it establishes her as such a villain right away. Because here's the thing. I pulled up the lyrics to this song just so we could like talk through this a little bit. Okay.
Go ahead.
So the song literally starts off with her saying, like, when Daddy Dear was floating on his deathbed, he divvied up the kingdom into two. I got his magic shell and have to see as well. His trident went to you-know-who. And my reign, why it was blissfully delicious, and glamour, glitz, and style were courant. Did I use some black magic? Well, oopsie, my bad. Did I mutilate, maim, and destroy? Just a tad. And for that, I get banished. But me, I'm not mad. There's just one thing that I want. One teensy thing that I want the good times back. So like just in that, it's like, okay, this is like, oh, she's a bad guy. Yeah, great. And like, what else would she possibly be? Everyone already knows Ursula is the villain. I mean, I get like sympathetic villains are like in right now. Like a lot of people will try to do that. And a lot of media that I've seen, they try to make the bad guys more relatable. Like the biggest example I can think of is like in the Marvel movies, Loki is a very beloved character now because they took this villain character and made him much more likable, which is fine. And for that character, it works. But there are a lot of villains that are just evil. Ursula is one of those, right? She likes to do bad things because it's fun. I think Daddy's Little Angel gives her a little more purpose as to why she's doing what she's doing, but at the same time, I don't care. I just want, like, you're not supposed to like Ursula. Or you do because of how bad she is.
I'm making a lot of self-discoveries.
Oh, are you?
Number one, I don't need a villain to be sympathetic to like them.
Mm-hmm.
I like to root for a bad guy. I think we've established this.
Yeah, I know your life. You're a Slytherin. That's how it works.
I like the Lannisters. What can I say? Number two. Number two. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, in the movie, Ursula is not established as King Triton's sister.
That's correct. That apparently that was like in an early draft. But then they cut it, and then what's his name? I'm sorry. When Doug Wright was writing the book, they gave him like the original like notes and things like that, and he put that back in there.
Right. So I think just by having that there at all, audience members can kind of glean that she's a jealous sister.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need a whole song about Daddy's Little Angel for me to understand her motivation.
Right.
Like, I don't think she just does bad things because they're fun. I think she's pissed off and has a vendetta and she wants revenge. And that's totally fine. That's what villains do.
Right.
But yeah, I agree. I do not like Daddy's Little Angel.
I Want the Good Times Back sets that up better than Daddy's Little Angel does, I think.
I don't know if I agree with that, but I think I Want the Good Times Back is a better song.
Okay.
And I think it fills the holes of that fun number that we lose by cutting human stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like that, I think that's a better fun number.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
I think Daddy's Little Angel's just annoying.
Yeah.
And I don't want to establish Ursula as an annoying character. I want to establish her as a villain.
Right.
And I want a fun, like, gritty villain number.
Sure. For sure. Like if you're gonna have a Disney villain, make him a Disney villain.
Yeah.
But I will say this. As I was listening to this song, there was a specific like stanza in the lyrics where I was like, as a teacher, can relate.
Go ahead.
So here is like thinking about it from an educational standpoint, this made me laugh. But that specific stanza is, I want to taste their tears. I want to hear their screams. I want the special rush you get from crushing hopes and dreams. And as a teacher, I was like, ha, that's funny. As a teacher, it made me laugh. Not that I like endorse that kind of behavior as an educator, but I know teachers who feel that way, and it made me laugh.
I keep a mug on my desk that says student tears still warm. That's
also true. But that's the thing. I was like, it made me laugh because I was thinking about it from an educator standpoint, and I thought it was very, very funny.
I wonder if part of the change, let's see. Oh, this would have been kind of early. I pulled up an article. So you know, Disney's kind of shifting away from having villains,
Right.
and it's more like inner conflict as the antagonist. Whatever.
Less fun, but go ahead.
I guess I understand the argument, but I like a good villain, and I don't think liking. Am I a bad person? I think liking villains makes me a bad person, but maybe.
No, I don't think so. I love villains. They're great.
They're
especially
fun.
Disney villains.
It does, but it didn't encourage, like, watching The Little Mermaid and being like, ooh, I like Ursula, didn't encourage me to, like, I'm going to become a scary sea octopus and steal people's voices. Like, anyway. I was just looking to see when that shift kind of started to happen. This article says it's really been since 2013 that, like, Frozen was kind of the new era of not really having a villain. Like, we had Princess and the Frog and Tangled, and then there hasn't really been a traditional quote-unquote villain since then. And I wonder if this is kind of the start of that, where, like, let's make Ursula less scary.
Yeah, I could kind of get that. I kind of see where they're coming from there.
Or maybe they were just going in a totally different direction because they had Sherry Renee Scott, and they were like, Sherry Renee Scott is not Pat Carroll and is not a drag queen.
Right.
So, like, they just wanted a totally different vibe.
Maybe that's true, but either way, as we've established, the original song is better. They shouldn't have changed it.
Yeah, I want the good times.
Anyway, so I believe what is right after that's Part of Your World. You know, Part of Your World is Disney staple. Like, even if you are not a fan of Disney, you probably know that song. But this is an observation that I've made, and I've told other people about it. I'm probably have mentioned to you before, but a lot of the times in Disney films, whenever they show like a clip, because I remember it specifically, there used to be, like, when you would put in the Disney VHS tape, dating myself here, put in the VHS tape, and it would always play like a little preview of, like, oh, here's all the other Disney movies that you can get, and they would show clips from different songs, like the popular songs. Like Beauty and the Beast, they always would show the Belle song, I Want Adventure in the Great White Somewhere, that part. And she's spinning around in a field, like Sound of Music. And then Ariel sings Part of Your World, and she sings Part of Your World, and then, like, she's up on the big rock, and there's a big splash of water behind her, all that stuff. Both of those moments are from the reprise of the original songs. They're not in the original song. So these iconic images, like when you see Part of Your World, and you think about that song in the original movie, how it ends, she's just kind of like, when she's singing, it goes like, I forget, she's in the cave, right? And she's like reaching out towards the surface, right? Like
pans up.
Yeah, and it pans up. The part where everyone remembers where she's on the rock and she's like, oh, and she hits that big note and the water splashes behind her, that's from the reprise after she saves Eric's life, right? So that's the part that always, like, that's something I always picture in my mind is that scene. It's from, like, you hear that song in your head, but it's from the reprise. It's not from the original version.
That's true.
And so that's something that I've noticed, and, like, they do it a lot. It's not like a common, like an uncommon thing. But that particular scene is so iconic. I feel like personally you have to include that visual in the show. If you don't, it kind of, like, falters a bit. And in the productions I've seen, that's not what happens. They don't do, because it's hard to do. I understand it's hard to do, but there's got to be a way to do it, you know, whether it's through projection or something else. You texting me in the middle of this?
I'll include this image in our show notes.
Yes, exactly. Those are always really funny. But yeah, that's what it's from, you know. And so that is a visual that I don't know if it was in the original Broadway production or not, but that's a visual that everyone will recognize. And so I think there's a way, if you can try to include it, and then not just not do it. Because even in the production that I watched most recently, Eric gets up and, you know, and he walks away and she sings the reprise of Part of Your World. She's standing by a rock, but she's not on the rock, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I thought that was weird. And I was like, if you're going to do it, at least put her on the rock, you know. But
I think that's also another flaw of the show going back and forth so much, because right after the Part of Your World reprise is She's in Love. Mm-hmm. And so then we have to go back underwater again. Mm-hmm. I personally think I don't like The World Above. I don't remember it enough to know what it even sounds like. I think Part of Your World needs to go there. Or maybe, I guess it probably has to go after Daughters of Triton. But I think Part of Your World that's the I Want song. It is far too late in the show. We are well into Act 1 before we get to that number.
That's
and so I
true,
think Part of Your World needs to get slotted farther up and then put the reprise later. But yeah, I think maybe this would benefit more from a projection heavy environment with some limited set pieces so that things could easily come on and off.
Yeah,
and you could have that, like you could put her on the rock. So I know you didn't see this production, I don't think, but a high school near where we are, which shall remain nameless for privacy, they did it last year. I'm pretty sure they did have a big rock set piece, and I know Ariel was on it at some points. I can't remember if she was on it at that moment. I imagine she probably was, but it like came out of their cove.
Oh, okay. I got
it looked real pretty.
You'd want it to, I would hope, but
yeah. I wonder if that's something like we just need to have projections that show the water splashing behind her.
Well, I will say though, like kind of you mentioned this, how it's far too late in the show. I think maybe that's also why they probably cut the Scuttle song and like early, because it kind of, I mean, they do take out that song and it bumps it up a little bit, but it's still after Ursula's introduction.
Yeah, I don't understand how, like, we can sit here. I mean, I don't want to call myself a musical theater expert. I do have a degree in musical theater. I know enough to be like, the I Want song should be like slot 3 and not any later. Why is it track 7 on the cast record? Like, just move it up. There had to be someone smarter than me on that team.
I don't know. I just think that because it's like it just flows with where it's at in the movie, but then again, they've added songs in between there.
Did we meet Ursula before Part of Your World in the movie? I haven't watched the movie in a long time.
You do. Yes, it's very brief. You just kind of see, like, she's not, like, I think she's mostly in shadow. I know it's like you kind of see kind of who she is, but she doesn't come out of the shadow until like later on. But you do meet her before that. But then to kind of, you mentioned it already, but I want to talk about She's in Love.
Yeah.
That is the best song they added in this show.
It's a bop.
It is such a bop. It's so good. And just like, also, I think I maybe mentioned this to you at one point, but it was like, I don't like the weird flounder subplot where he's like head over heels in love with Ariel. That's super weird.
It's weird.
And maybe, I guess, and like, maybe it's endearing because he's traditionally he's played by a little boy. He's played by a boy, and she's a teenager. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, kind of like unrequited love or whatever. But she's also a mermaid, and he is a fish, like a straight up fish, and that's weird, and I don't like it. I like I said, I guess it was an attempt to make it more funny or endearing, I guess. Like, be like, oh, he's so cute, and whatever. But like, Flounder is played by a boy, like a young kid, he's gonna be cute regardless of whether you have that weird subplot in there or not. And to be honest, it doesn't go anywhere. What's the point of adding this?
Yeah, I think I don't want to be so hateful. The book is all of the problems with this. I think Doug Wright really screwed the pooch on this one. He won the Pulitzer Prize and the Tony Award for I Am My Own Wife. And was like working on very much like not kid-friendly stuff.
Right.
I was going to say adult entertainment. That has a different connotation. That's not what I mean.
Yeah.
He was working on things that not Disney stuff.
Not Disney stuff, right.
Right. And so I think working on he did Grey Gardens before this too. I think The Little Mermaid I wonder. I don't know this for sure. I'm making very bold assumptions about this human. That he's like, oh no, what do the kids like? What would be family friendly? And I wonder if that's part of this culture of the aughts where we're like, let's put a cheesy joke in. Let's put some more fish puns. You know what the show
Yeah.
needs? More puns, more jokes about other fish.
Yeah, squid pro quo,
Like,
looking at you.
Why? Ugh. Why? What's Flounder's motivation? Did we sit down and do like a character assignment for Flounder? Be like, what's Flounder's motivation? Why is he following Ariel around and doing whatever she wants? It must be because he's thinking with his fish. Like,
I mean, like, I
like
get
why can't they
that.
just be friends?
They're just friends. Like,
They're just friends.
Yeah.
Flounder's a dorky looking fish, and Ariel's nice to it. Like,
yeah,
why can't that just be it? No, like
that should
no.
just be it. Gosh, that's so uncomfortable.
Why, yeah, is it cute because like, oh, he's a 10 or 12-year-old boy and she's a grown lady, and it's like, oh, it's funny that he has a crush on her because she's a Disney princess and he's just a little boy. But
Maybe.
I've seen many school productions where Flounder is played by a girl
Mm-hmm.
because in high school theater we have more girls than boys usually,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't really matter.
No, not really.
But then I think, like, are we adding layers of weirdness because Flounder's got a weird crush on Ariel?
I mean, that's how it comes off to me. It just seems like this isn't necessary. Like, I don't know why this was added in here.
I also think they tried, we can talk about this a little more later too, I think they tried to beef up all of the supporting leads.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of that was like, well, let's give Flounder a subplot. So he'll have 3 awkward lines about having a crush on Ariel, and then that beefs up that character.
Right. You know, now that you mention it, this is a thought I had earlier but didn't expand on because we were talking. But Disney does throw in a lot of like random side characters, and if they tend to do, as they will sometimes, these Broadway adaptations of these animated films, they, like you said, beef up these extra characters that are they're relevant to the plot for the most part, but like my biggest thing for this, my biggest example, and I feel like the worst offender of this is Frozen. And just to go off on a tangent to talk about it a little bit, but the Oaken Lodge owner guy who's in the movie, the yoo-hoo, big some blowout, that guy has a whole number in the show, which we don't need, but it's there.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a little bit like that with some of this stuff where maybe that's why Flotsam and Jetsam have a number.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need one.
Well, then they had more.
Apparently.
It got to Broadway.
Apparently. And it's a fun number. I really like it. It's great. I think it adds to the show a lot. And not every side character needs a song. Now, it makes sense to make Scuttle is a main part of the plot. It makes sense to give him one. It would make sense to give Flounder a song because Flounder is a big part of, he's Ariel's best friend. He's a big part of the plot. They don't give Flounder his own song, but he does sing in a couple of different ones. He's featured in She's in Love for sure. And then Sebastian already had 2 songs. You don't need to give him more, and I don't think they did. They just added him to some kind of other things. But there's, that's just kind of how it is, and that's fine. But it's just like anyway, it's just a tangent to go on to talk about. Like, I don't know why they keep giving side characters more stuff to do.
I think it's all about beefing up the plot, like beefing up those roles. Or surely this doesn't happen. But I wonder if they sit down, they have a table talk about, okay, we're going to turn Little Mermaid into a stage musical, and here's your team. And the movie's about 90 minutes long, and we're going to shoot for 2 hours, 2:15 for the stage show, right? That's pretty standard for a musical. So we're looking at adding about 45 minutes of material potentially. And every single person went home and added their own 45 minutes of material. And then came back and they were all like, but wait, I gave Flounder a subplot about being in love with Ariel. And it's like, but wait, I gave every secondary character 3 songs. And now it's like we're piecing, like, what? Okay, now we need to trim back. Like, surely that doesn't happen. But
I mean, it might.
Why is there so much stuff?
I don't know.
We were all so excited that we all wrote. We're like, don't like Alan Menken and Doug Wright were like had a feud over whose stuff is going to get added to the show.
Anyway,
sure,
maybe
not.
I don't know, but anyway, yeah, She's in Love.
She's in Love is so fun.
Best new song they added in this show.
I love it so much. When I saw the nearby production, I immediately was like, ooh, I want to do this with our kids because we've got a bunch of pretty great belters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be a great thespian piece.
Oh, yeah,
but
for sure.
It has not come to fruition yet, but maybe.
Well, we'll work on it. We'll see what we can do. But I agree. It is very, very good.
We'll work on it. No one has time for that.
I know. It's like I said it with an asterisk.
Certainly not me.
You didn't hear the asterisk in my voice, but I did put one there when I said it. We'll work
My
on
mistake.
it. Asterisk. Anyway, I had this in my notes. I forgot to mention it. I'll go back to it. So I mentioned it really briefly too. Her voice. Actually, it's good.
That's next.
It's the next song. It's good to talk about it now. So never mind. So her voice, the next song, giving Eric songs makes sense. You know, he doesn't sing at all in the original, in the original source material, so it makes sense to give the love interest songs. This song, when I've heard it for the first time, like I don't mind it's a big lovey ballad or whatever, but this is probably the most Alan Menken song I've ever heard in my life. And I say that only because Alan Menken has written hundreds of songs for all kinds of stuff. One of those things that he wrote songs for was the DreamWorks film, The Prince of Egypt. There's a song in The Prince of Egypt. You're familiar with that, right? That movie?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Just making sure. It also has become a musical adaptation, but I believe it's in
Stage
London
musical.
right now. Stage musical, yeah. It's become a stage musical. But there's a song in that movie called All I Ever Wanted. And the way that the lyrics and the music are, I don't know the technical term for it, but the way that they are written sounds like, her voice sounds like All I Ever Wanted from that movie. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. So there's
Right.
also a couple of musical motifs where they are exactly the same as Beauty and the Beast, even in the same key. So
Oh, really?
It's like, oh yeah, there's no denying when you hear an Alan Menken, you're like, oh yeah, that's him. Hear those French horns? Gotta be him.
So what specifically do you mean by like comparing this to Beauty and the Beast? Like what's the same, or like what is the musical motifs that are consistent?
There's a couple of there's just a couple of moments, especially I think it's especially when Eric is on stage, that are I couldn't pinpoint exactly where they are just off the top of my head, but they are exactly. I heard it when I was preparing for this today and was like, oh yeah, that's Beauty and the Beast as well. So it's just, and I don't fault him. He's plagiarizing himself.
Yeah.
I think that's just part, like Alan Menken is so much of the Disney sound,
Mm-hmm.
especially like Disney Renaissance sound.
Right, for sure.
That like you hear it and you're like, oh yeah, that must be a Disney, and
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
That golden age of Disney. Yeah. It doesn't bother me either. I just was like, huh. Even like the cadence is the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, this is exactly like, and maybe if you're not familiar with both of them, that you wouldn't recognize that. But I was immediately like, huh. And then I like went back and listened to the other song, and I was like, nope, that's the same. It's almost like, I think even like the notes are the same, but the cadence is exactly the same. It's like a sing-talky part, like makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It just for me it was very surprising. But I was like, wow, this is the most Alan Menken thing I think I've ever heard. And it just was just for me was very, very funny. And we're not even through Act 1 yet.
I know. Well, not very much happens in Act 2.
I was
so
about to
it's
say,
okay.
but to be fair, Act 1 is the big beefy part of this musical. Anyway, Ariel doesn't talk in the second act. She sings a couple of songs that are like asides, but there's no like she doesn't talk. She can't talk in the second act of the show. So there's that. But I mean, even like one of those things, for me it's funny going into this. If you had just heard Little Mermaid was gonna be a stage musical, the Disney Little Mermaid was gonna be a stage musical, your immediate thought would be, oh, Under the Sea is gonna be like the big musical number, like with everybody. And like, yes, correct. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's your big like end of act, or not quite end of act 1, but near the end of act 1.
Mm-hmm.
Big dance number.
I mean, before I even like heard it, I'm like, Titus Burgess kills it because he's great, right? I wouldn't expect anything less. I'm pretty sure. Was Little Mermaid nominated for Tonys?
2.
So it did perform. I think I remember seeing a Tony performance.
Well, it was nominated for Best Score, I believe, and I know Sierra Boggess sang part of a song for the Tonys, but it only was nominated for 2. Where'd it go?
I mean...
Oh, Lighting Design. And Best Original Score.
Okay.
Because Natasha Katz is everything. Are there other lighting designers on Broadway? No. There is only Natasha Katz.
I remember seeing the stage production of The Little Mermaid. I remember seeing their version of Under the Sea. I thought it was maybe a Tony performance, but maybe it was like Good Morning America or something. But they did Under the Sea, and I was like, well, of course they did, because that's the one that you want people to come, and like that's the big draw, is that song, because it's everyone. Even if you're not a fan of Disney, you do know that song, right? It's one of the most popular Disney songs of all time, so of course. That's what they're going to do, and they're going to make it this big spectacle number, and it is, by far. I mean, it's funny to think that this show, this particular number is so big, they do it twice. They literally do the song right after they finish it. There's a reprise immediately after that song.
Is it considered a reprise, or is it considered an encore?
It's considered a reprise. It's listed as a reprise in this.
This is another thing where I'm like, this kind of goes back to that old school Broadway where you'd have the song and then there would be an encore built into that. A bunch of old shows have that with a big act 1, especially like a big act 1 number. I can think of, I won't spoil the show because we'll save it. It's one of my favorites. It has at least 2 songs that have encores built into them in act 1.
Oh, jeez.
And they're long and repetitive, but if you have if it's a big cast number and there's lots of fun choreography and the audience is having a good time, then why not? But
sure, and it makes sense for that song. It just does. Like I'm not mad about it. I'm just like, of course, this is the one that they do.
Yeah, well, and I think we've had right before that. You have Her Voice. You have King Triton's reprise of The World Above. Like a couple of. Not that they're downers, but they're slow, dramatic ballads. Yeah. And then to have a big number, especially, I don't know if we've talked about this on mic before, but there is something about that like gospel choir-y sound that I cannot control it. It makes me cry. And listening to Titus Burgess sing Under the Sea is one of those songs. Like he gets those high notes at the end and I tear up. I cannot help it. It makes me want just to like sob because it's so beautiful.
Well, that sounds very much like you.
Music does it for me. And then we have Sweet Child, which is Flotsam and Jetsam, and then Poor Unfortunate Souls, which is what we're all really here for.
Right. I mean, yes. On the tier list of best Disney villain songs, that's at least top 2, if not number 1. I feel like it's like that and Be Prepared are like top 2.
Hot take. I don't like The Lion King that much.
So you're allowed to be wrong, just like you always are.
I know.
But anyway, that being said.
Yeah, no, Ursula. How many Disney villains are female? It's kind of just Ursula, right? Not
many. It's like her, Mother Gothel from Tangled.
Oh, Mother Gothel. Okay.
Mother Gothel from Tangled. That's kind of it. I mean, because, Gaston, Dr. Facilier from Princess and the Frog. Even like something for like something obscure like The Great Mouse Detective has Ratigan, so it's like it's a male villain.
So I mean, I guess is it obvious that Ursula is one of my dream roles? I love Ursula in this show, and I knew that it was a musical when it became a musical. I was aware of it, but I didn't really dig into it because I was a moody teenager and I was really into Stephen Sondheim. And so I just didn't dig into it that much. And then later on, I was probably in college, I found out that it was Sherry Renee Scott that had played Ursula. And then I was like, if she played it, I have a similar voice type. I could play it. I'm like, that's a villain role that I want so bad. Someday. And that's not a role I will age out of anytime soon.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Whereas the other Sherry Renee Scott roles, I'm aging out of very quickly. So, yes, I would love to play Ursula. And it's all in the higher keys. And, it's delicious. We love a good villain. Please cast me as Ursula in your local community theater production of The Little Mermaid.
Also, like, her costume is so cool in the original production. Like, she hits that kind of like that end part of that song before she does the enchantment, the incantation, and like all the tentacles come up and it's just around her. That's like a peacock tail. It's so good. So good.
Myself, but yes,
I mean, like,
love it.
And I don't think that's anything that the way I like saw her move it, it looked like she kind of controls part of it, but I don't think she controls the whole thing. But I can also see why like a lot of productions, like amateur productions, try to replicate that, but that's really hard.
It's really hard.
It's really hard. I'm like,
they try to do because scaled down a little bit.
Right, because like you're a costume person, so you not fully, but you understand enough about it to where it's like
I teach it sometimes.
You teach it sometimes, but you're like. But that it wasn't your focus in college or anything.
No.
So
it's just become a thing I have to do now that I'm a teacher.
Right. But like, so even that, like, trying to look at that and try to figure out how to get that to work is one thing, and then actually building it is another. And like, for me being a technical person, I can definitely like see how it could work, but it's not easy to do.
This is one where I would just call the costumer and be like, "Hey, I'm doing The Little Mermaid. What you got?"
Yeah. Just call gonna call up anyone that will rent you that costume or a very similar costume. The productions I've seen, they did not do that. They made it themselves. Also, if you're gonna make an Ursula costume, make it purple. Ursula's colors are like purple and blue. Or black. Don't make it.
Did it bother you that
weird shades of green?
That Ariel was all turquoise.
There is a production where Ariel was all turquoise.
Yeah, the one that we both watched recently.
Oh no, her
Ariel did not have purple seashells.
No,
she was all turquoise.
No, she didn't.
Act 2, she has all turquoise then.
Oh, maybe Act 2 she does, but Act 1 I thought it was purple and then had the turquoise tail.
Oh. Maybe.
Because that's also something like I've heard a lot of people like comment about and make fun of, is like all the sisters have like a matching seashell and tail, and then Ariel doesn't. Because she's special.
That's because she's a spoiled youngest child.
Yeah, well, you would know all about that.
I'm the oldest.
I know, that's why I'm saying. That's why I'm saying you would know about that. I'm a middle child, so I didn't get anything.
Except forgotten.
Except forgotten, right? That's true.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Which
one are you? Oh, right.
Which one?
Where's he at?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, but Pour a Fortune of Souls is such a great choice for the Act 1 closer. It has to be there. There's no other, like, you can't continue after that. It's like you have to take a break after that because it's.
I think Ariel's transformation is the Act 1 finale. Like, I think looking at it, that's the logical place to do it.
For sure.
I'm trying to remember if it's actually that far in the movie. I mean, the movie's probably more of a 3-act structure.
A little bit more, yeah.
So it's probably the end of Act 1, which gives a little more towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I think that made perfect sense. Mm. And yeah, to go to the intermission there and then to come back. And I don't think Positivity is anything except for a fluffy Act 2 opener, which is what we need.
Yep. And I wrote, in my notes, insert obligatory tap number here.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It serves the purpose. Like, if you're going to do a Broadway show, you got to have at least one tap number.
Well, and I don't really understand the purpose of Positivity. Like, lyrically, what are we trying, like, why don't we just put human stuff there?
I don't know. It's a good point.
Or you could keep the musicality of Positivity and just make it more human stuff lyrically.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
It's just, we have this funny costume of a seagull and everyone likes Scuttle, so let's do a funny number with feathers and tap shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Again, is that part of that 2007 culture of like, let's be goofy and silly? People like goofy.
I mean, maybe that might be exactly what
I'm trying
that
to
is.
remember. I was in like 07. Yeah. 07, 08. I was like 8th grade, 9th grade. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember. I was already hateful and miserable by then. So I don't know what pop culture was enjoying. But.
Well, I mean, you're just not a pop culture person anyway.
No.
Yeah. Anyway. I mean, honestly, I kind of feel like there are not a ton of highlights in Act 2. It kind of drags, honestly, in my opinion. But like Positivity is like you said, kind of the fluffy opening number. Beyond My Wildest Dreams is kind of just a boring song. There's like nothing really that sticks out to me in that specific song.
And I don't really like listening to it because we have a particularly talented musical theater student who I've heard sing it, and I think she sings it better than anyone else I've ever heard.
Oh, wow.
So like listening to other people, I'm like, it's not as good.
Yeah, well, there's that. After that's Les Poissons, which is like so fun. But again, I'm going to go back to my whole side characters thing. It's like, but I'm okay with this one more because it's a side character that's already built into the original movie. So I am okay with bringing him over versus just giving other characters different songs.
Well, and I think we need a comedy number at this point. Like,
right.
By the time we're getting into the heart of Act 2, like my butt is tired of sitting in a seat. So we need a comedy number to get us going. Chef Louis is the perfect cameo role.
For sure.
John Stamos played him. Like, that's
I know.
Perfect cameo. Like, bring in your big star. Why did we ever do Peter Pan live? We should have done The Little Mermaid live.
Oh, yeah.
He would have been so much better as Chef Louis than Captain Hook.
I agree. Yeah. I agree for sure.
Right, you don't need to be an amazing. It's fun if you do have a great singer in that role. I don't think you have to be a good singer in that role.
I was watching the amateur production, and as I'm sitting here watching it, I'd be like, "This is the part I want in this show." It's Chef Louis. That's the part I want. You know.
Yeah.
Like, it's so much fun. Like, oh, I get to go out and be a goofus for 3 minutes. Yeah, sure, go for it.
That is the role for you.
That's the one I'd want to do. Yeah, for sure. But it's great. I like that. I like that it gets a reprise. Mm-hmm. You know, encore. Pretty much. We continue the chase sequence a little bit, so it's just fun. Fun fact: I don't think I know if I mentioned this or not, but I went to New York and got to tour the New Amsterdam. And they had a bunch of stuff left over from Little Mermaid that people could like look at and stuff. And one of the things they had was the tiny Titus Burgess under the cloche. They had that still. So like you could walk up, like you have under the cloche. Like when it's during the reprise, he walks up walks up and he pulls the cloche off, and then there's a little tiny Titus Burgess with like a big head that's like whatever. Like it's like, and there's someone who like makes it move, and I think they take it and I think they close it, and then he climbs out from under the table and they start chasing him or something like that. But it was very, very funny.
Yeah.
And like it was so much fun. I actually got to put on the Sebastian jacket too, the original one. I will say that it does not fit me. I am a broad man. I don't think I'm necessarily fat, but I am very broad-shouldered, and at the time, Titus Burgess was not a broad-shouldered person. So I put on the jacket, but it was very hard to take off after I put it on. Like I was afraid to rip this hundreds of dollar custom-made suit jacket. I was really afraid I was going to break it. But it was cool.
Wait a second. I just had a thought. So I know Les Poissons is not in the movie.
It is.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it in that? But it's later in the movie, isn't it?
No, it's around the same time. It's in later in the movie. Yeah, it's in the Act 2 of the film. But yes, it's
but isn't it like right? So in the movie, because they cut the whole Vanessa subplot, which is sad to me because I don't. It's been a long time since I've seen the movie, but I do remember thinking it was really fun that Ursula would turn herself into a brunette version of Ariel.
Right, yeah.
Like, exactly. This, like, she's her evil doppelganger, but they have different hair, and that's how you can tell them apart.
Yeah.
But isn't he, like, they are about to get married, right?
No.
In the movie?
They're just having dinner. Movie? No, they're just having dinner.
Really?
Uh-huh. You need to watch this movie
okay.
again.
Maybe I should watch this movie before we talked about this.
Because yeah, probably. No, what happens in the film is that Ariel comes out and she's naked because mermaid. And then she comes up and then they find Scuttle, and Scuttle's like, something different. I can't figure it out. And he's literally sitting like on her leg. And he's like, I can't figure out what's different. And then Sebastian says, she's got legs, you idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh, yeah. And then Eric comes and finds her and brings her back to the castle. And, she bathes and does different things. And, right after that, or pretty soon after that, is when we get Le Poisson in the movie. And Chef Louis is cooking. He's preparing dinner where he's cutting off fish heads. And Sebastian is horrified. And then he sees Sebastian and tries to cook him.
I would have said that was after Vanessa, but okay. I believe you.
No,
I'm
just
just trying to
it
reconcile this thought in my head. But anyway, is that my favorite song in the show? Maybe. I think that's the funniest.
It's great. It's really fun. After that, One Step Closer is fine. It's another love ballad.
Boring.
Eric sings a lot of ballads in this show. And then after that, we get a reprise from Ursula. And originally, it's I Want the Good Times Back. But then now, in the licensed version, we get a reprise of the bad song, Daddy's Little Angel. And I just do not care. But this is when she's like, I've got to take things up a notch because what we've been trying isn't working, so I got to take it up a notch. And then that's when we get to, for me, another banger from this show is Kiss the Girl. I played that song at my wedding, honestly. It's such a good song. And I understand this. The song is great. I think it serves its point. It serves its purpose for what it is trying to do. I understand there are people out there that are like, oh, the song's kind of, it's encouraging non-consensual things. Mm-hmm. I very heartily disagree with that for this main reason. What is Ariel's goal? And these are questions I'm going to ask you that I would like you to answer. What is?
Oh, okay. I was going to say, is this rhetorical?
No, it's not rhetorical. What is Ariel's goal?
Her goal is to get Eric to kiss her.
Correct. And that is because if he does, she'll get to stay human, right?
Because she's in love with him.
Because she's in love with him, right. Her goal is for that to happen. Now, she is not able to speak, so she cannot physically say, yes, it's okay for you to kiss me. She cannot say that physically, right? But there are other ways to indicate approval without using your words.
Well, yeah, that's like saying people who do not have the ability to speak are unable to give consent.
Right. That's not accurate. But I always think whenever people get harp on this song for that particular reason, I'm like, Ursula literally says to her, never underestimate the power of body language. She says that to Ariel in the show, that there are ways Ariel can give consent for Eric to kiss her without having to physically say it, right? And the way, when Sebastian's singing that song, he says, yes, you want her, look at her, you know you do. He's like, Sebastian is also aware of Ariel's feelings for Eric, and he's aware of Eric's feelings for Ariel, and he's just saying, she wants this to happen, it's okay, basically is what Sebastian is saying in this whole kind of thing. Now, he's the middleman that shouldn't, if this is going to happen in real life, there shouldn't be a middleman necessarily, but that's beside the point.
A crab is not going to talk to you and tell you what to do, and if a crab is telling you to kiss someone, then you should seek help.
That's also true. Don't hear that if you're a child and you're listening to this, or by child I mean a teenager, don't get advice from crabs. It's not going to work out for you. Just don't worry about it.
Talking crabs.
Or really any animal for that matter.
Probably no talking animals.
Don't talk to animals. Or you can talk to animals, just don't expect them to give you solid advice. But yeah, it's I understand some people's feelings, and I'm like, have you seen this movie? Are you aware of what Ariel wants, of what Eric wants, of what the song is about. Because like you can take whatever you want and take it out of context and you know, shape it any way you want to. But like Ariel wants this to happen. So with Sebastian saying you want to kiss her, he's like trying to convince Eric like to do that because he wants like it need like his and one, it needs to happen because if it doesn't, Ariel's gonna die. Or not necessarily die in the movie. In the original book by Hans Christian Andersen, she is going to die if this doesn't happen. It's not that way in the Disney movie. I know that, but it's still like I don't see why people get so up in arms about it.
I agree. I think potentially, just if you pull the song out of context and look at it, you know, potentially I could see where people would have concerns. I think in the context of this particular movie and musical, the concern about consent shouldn't be there. But I think some of that just comes from this new culture of like, this is bad and we should hate it. Like,
right. Yeah.
So I remember when, I guess it was probably when the new movie started, like the buzz for the new movie began, and I wonder if this is, I'm trying to remember if I heard any buzz about this song being not good before COVID, because I think people spent too much time sitting alone in their houses and they're bored, and it just got fun to cancel things online. And now we're like, well, it's bad, and everything's bad. There's one maybe tiny sort of questionable thing, and instead of analyzing the whole situation, let's just cancel the whole thing because it's bad.
Right. Yeah.
I think, yeah. I think that's a really immature way to look at things.
Right.
And I think we see it more probably because we work with teenagers whose brains are still developing, and they hear one thing and it's really fun to jump on a bandwagon and have big emotions, even though you don't need to.
Well, it's like a thing too, like, and like I understand like what toxic masculinity is and like all this kind of thing. And I agree. Yes. When people are that way, it is bad. Cancel culture is also a toxic thing because it's limited so many people's like perceptions. I feel like saying something is bad because of this one minor thing and saying that, oh, this whole thing should be thrown in the garbage, the whole thing's trash because of this one little thing, is not a healthy reaction. Mm-hmm. And so, in my opinion, cancel culture is also a toxic thing that people have just kind of fallen into, and especially younger people have accepted as being like, oh, this is just a thing that we do. And I'm like, yes, but I mean, if there's no, personally, if there's no conflict, there's nothing to talk about. Mm-hmm. And like, if you take a lot of the things that and to be fair, there are things that I do think that are not okay. I don't think everything is fair game, right? There are certain things that should not be talked about and joked about, sure. But yeah, like we're saying, specifically with cancel The Little Mermaid because of this one song, you take it out of context, you can make anything fit your agenda, fit what you want to say.
Yeah. Well, and doesn't she just like wash up naked on the beach?
Pretty much, yeah.
Right? She washes up naked on the beach, and he's like, oh, you need help. Let me take you to my house. I will clothe you and feed you and make sure that you have all the things you need. Mm-hmm. And then the next day, we're on a sailboat or a rowboat, and he still hasn't even tried to kiss her. I'd be wondering if he's actually into girls. She was literally naked on the beach.
That's a fair point.
I mean, he is a sailor.
True.
There's a lot of handsome men on that sailboat with him.
Sailing the high seas all the time.
He only likes her voice because tenors love sopranos.
I suppose that's true.
Gay boys like princesses too.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, I'm not. Yeah.
Anyway, moving on.
Cancel culture.
Cancel culture. Anyway, that song's a banger. Get over yourself.
Yeah.
It's a great song.
Yeah. Stop ruining things that don't deserve to be ruined.
So, right after Kiss the Girl, we get a reprise of Sweet Child, and we get the quartet that reminds me of Shrek. There's a song very similar to this in Shrek where Donkey, Fiona, and Shrek are singing at the same time. And this is essentially the same idea. It's just 4 of them instead. What's the name of that song in Shrek?
Well, I feel like that's kind of a common thing for musical theater, to have this quartet where like, oh, let's fit all these songs back together. But I don't think it works very well here.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It's like,
I think it's forced. I don't like it.
Yeah. Well, like I've said several times before, Shrek is the first musical I was ever in. And that song that they sing, I believe it's I Could Be a Hero or whatever that, I can't remember the name of the song. Spotify's working too slow right now. Let me see if I can find it.
It's like, ooh, what if we had a One Day More but make it Disney?
Right. Yeah. I just don't like it. I mean, it's boring. We got Eric who's singing because Eric sings only sad songs or slow songs. Ariel is singing a slow song because she's like, oh no, Eric is going to get married and it's not going to be me because he doesn't love me because I can't talk. Or he's looking for this specific voice that she can't take care of. Okay, the Shrek song is called Who I'd Be. That's what it is. Who I'd Be. And that song is really, really good. The first time I heard that song, I cried. But anyway.
But that's true of like 90% of songs you hear.
Sure, yeah. But anyway, If Only, the quartet with Ariel, Eric, Sebastian, and Triton. It's like Triton is like, Ariel's sad because Eric is not in love with her yet. Eric is sad because he can't find the one voice he's looking for. Triton is sad because Ariel's not there. And then Sebastian is just sad, I think, because he's a crab. Like, I don't know. I think Sebastian is sad because he can't help her. He can't help them, I guess. I don't know. It was kind of confusing.
I don't understand why Sebastian needed to. I think they decided they wanted a quartet. And they were like, okay, Ariel and Prince Eric, that makes sense. And like, who else could we include? And I guess Sebastian's the one that makes the most sense.
I don't think they put Ursula in.
I mean, Ursula, I think, could be fun if you want to undermine it a little bit. But, like, Flounder was right there.
That's true, yeah.
And
also
then you could have had another trouble voice.
Flounder doesn't do anything.
Flounder
doesn't do anything in Act 2. He shows up at the end for the finale, pretty much. But he doesn't do... Oh, he's also there in Positivity, where he stands in the background. Because Flounder's in that scene, too.
I really think that quartet needs another treble voice. It really bothers me that it's 3 like baritone voices and then Ariel. I just like it doesn't have enough balance in my opinion. And I think Flounder's right there. I feel like Flounder likes Ariel more than Sebastian does.
That's true.
Right?
That is
like,
very
why
true.
Wouldn't Flounder be sad?
Yeah.
Flounder could be sad that she's going to marry Prince Eric and not him.
Right. You know.
His little 12-year-old self.
Yeah. Always a bridesmaid, never the bride. Poor Flounder. Anyway, but yeah, so like, I am okay with like this whole thing with like, okay, now we're gonna parade princesses out for Eric to marry because Grimsby's like, you need to marry someone soon. I don't know why it has to be so soon. That's not quite explained. Grimsby's just like, you have to marry someone on like the day before your birthday's over, or guess we're just not going to do that. Like, it's not a real reason as to why this is a subplot.
I think it just has to align with the kiss her in 3 days. Or I don't know, when does the Little Mermaid take place? Like, what time period? Because, I mean, if how old is he? 18, 20? He's not married yet? I mean, he's basically an old man who can't ever have children. If he's 20 and unmarried. I mean, she's 16 in the movie. I don't think they really established that in the stage show. But, like, she's basically an old maid.
I don't think they
How
say
much
that.
time does she have left?
So, looking at this, it said, like, the original book was published in 1837. So, if you want to go with that, that's around the time. If you want to go with that, that's around the time that this takes place. Did they have silver pots or copper pots back then? Yeah. I don't know. I think they had definitely had silver. Well, I mean, they had definitely had silver because 1776 is when the United States was formed, and Paul Revere was a silversmith. Sorry, random history knowledge, but like if it takes place around 1837, which I was like, if it was, but even then, I'm sure it was like, oh, a long time ago, once upon a time. It wasn't like this is a modern day story or whatever. But if the story's set in that time period, like I guess, yeah, technically he would be his like, oh, you're past marrying age because you're older than 13 or whatever it was. But then again, like a lot of the times too, it didn't matter how old the dude was. Just girls had to be like, were usually somewhere between like 13 to 16 when they got married, or were married to someone, like got married off to people.
Oh, the patriarchy. Okay, this article says that the Disney movie Little Mermaid is kind of hard to place because of the costumes. Like if you look at it from the clothing, Grimsby is dressed kind of Georgian, and Ariel's pink dress is like, there's like parts of it that kind of hit different periods from like the Renaissance all the way to the 1840s, and then Eric's costume is like but then the Ariel's wedding dress like could have been 1890s, so like mid to late 1800s ?
Well, it's also a fairy tale. It doesn't matter.
Well,
That's kind of the point. It doesn't really matter.
As someone who has to teach costume history, it matters to me a little bit.
Well, sure, okay. Then for that argument, yes, that might be.
But anyway, it's feasible that she's 16 and he's like
anyway, but
late teens, early 20s to be like, get married or you'll die and never have an heir. Or whatever it is people are worried about at that point.
Yeah. It's not really clear. It's kind of just ambiguous as why that's the case. But I don't mind adding in this kind of subplot where there's like, oh, there's a contest and it's like we're gonna parade a bunch of princesses out in front of you, and like I would have hated it much more if like these princesses were like other Disney princesses, but they didn't do that, right? They didn't. They're just generic princesses, right? Mm-hmm. They're not saying like, oh, they're from a specific place or whatever. Or I think Grimsby does at one point mention, oh, this girl's from this place, but it's like they're not already pre-established Disney characters.
Yes, I do think that's a great substitute for the Vanessa subplot from the movie. It's like, well, we can't really, we don't have the time to transform the actor playing Ursula from Sea Witch to Ariel, like Great Value brand Ariel. But
well, here's the thing though. You don't have to. You just get a different actor to play Vanessa, and then you have a technical thing where you switch from Vanessa to Ursula, right? Because if you're familiar with the Disney movie, Ursula doesn't look anything like Vanessa.
But that's because she's a magical sea witch and it's a cartoon.
Look, if they can transform Fiona from Princess Fiona into Shrek Fiona on stage, they can do something like that.
Have you seen where they double cast Princess Fiona and Shrek Fiona? Because I've seen that and I hate it. So why would we double cast Vanessa and the Sea Witch? No. This is what we're gonna fight about on this episode.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, this is what we're gonna fight about. Because like
this is a perfect
Vanessa is supposed to look like Ariel.
Like, oh, Philippe is a horse. What should we do? How will we put a horse on stage? You don't. We're just going to make a weird little robot contraption, and that's fine. We don't need a horse. Same thing. We don't need Vanessa. We have 6 annoying princesses who are also the Mer sisters, usually singing a thinly veiled reprise of the song they sang earlier in the show.
Right. Sure. But even then, like, so here's a question, though. Are these princesses supposed to be bad singers?
I think it adds to the fun if they are.
In the content and the recording of the soundtrack, I don't think that they are. I just think they don't sound the way that he wants them to. He's looking for a specific voice, and none of them sound the way he wants them to sound. And so, or he's looking for a specific voice and he's not hearing it, right? So I don't remember them sounding bad, but I mean, I guess if you want to add to the fun of it, you can make them sound bad, but I don't think it's a necessity.
Well, so he's looking for this specific voice, right? But what if a better voice comes along? Like that's what, like Ariel is very beautiful, So obviously he doesn't really care that much about what she looks like, right? Like the singing voice, that's the thing he's into.
Right.
So what if an even better voice comes along and he's like, fuck Ariel, I found something better. Ariel was a 9, she's a 10.
Man, that's a good point.
I mean, I guess they established earlier on that Ariel is the most beautiful singer.
True. They do say that earlier, like before they do Daughters of Triton, or like during the song, they kind of establish that.
Also, Jonathan Freeman doesn't get enough credit. So versatile.
He is. He's really great.
I think it's just that the Disney sound, like the Disney princess sound, is like a mixy. It's not really belty. It's more mixy, and they just belt.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as quote unquote pretty. It's a little more brassy.
Sure, I guess maybe, but I don't know. I didn't think they necessarily had to be a bad singer. They just needed to sound different. But then again, you don't want a princess that's going to sing better than Ariel. So there's also that.
And it's funnier if they sing bad because they've already, especially if you're using the Mer sisters as the princesses, because you already know that they can sing it pretty.
Sure.
And so now they get to sing it bad, and it's fun.
Sure, I get that. Anyway, let's talk about the end of this show.
Okay.
Because
it sucks.
It sucks. I have not seen a show fizzle out this badly. I don't think ever. I mean, because like here's the thing. I understand that the original animated film sets up this like kind of epic, big, like scary finale where like Ursula becomes like this giant sea kraken monster, and then how she dies is she like tries to wreck the ship, and Eric drives the ship into her and like stabs her in the gut. It's like one of the most violent Disney deaths we've ever seen, like in an animated film, right? I understand we can't do that on stage, at least not to that extent, right? Unless you are going to use maybe something like projections or other type of puppetry, something to maybe try to do that. But even then, I think anything along the lines of that would have been better than what we got, right? Because like when I think about the kind of the end of the third act of the film, what happens is Ursula turns into Vanessa and uses Ariel's voice to get Eric to fall in love with her, and then she does some magic on him to make him entranced, and they're going to get married. It's not like I'm going to parade in these different women and you have to pick one. It's he is getting married to Vanessa. Right. And then it becomes we have to stop the wedding versus, we got to save Ariel, I guess. I mean, it's kind of twofold in there, right? To save Ariel, they have to stop the wedding, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of how it works at the end. But basically, like, Ariel starts to turn back into a mermaid. Ursula turns back into herself, grabs Ariel, and then brings her back down to the bottom of the ocean. Triton gives up himself to save her. She turns into a big sea monster because magic. And then Eric realizes he is in love with this mermaid and then uses the ship to kill Ursula. That's the animated film. What we get in the Broadway show, or in the stage version, is all these other women show up and Eric says, "Yeah, it's not any of them though." And then Ariel tries her hand even though she can't talk. And he's just kind of like, "Oh, that's cute." And then he hears the voice that he is wanting or he's looking for. And then Ursula shows up just looking like Ursula, grabs Ariel, takes her to the bottom of the ocean. Then Triton shows up and he's like, "Hey, not cool, sis." And she goes like, "Hey, you want to save her?" Trade places with her, basically, right? Right? That's what happens. And then so he starts to die, roughly, or she takes his soul. I guess.
It's like a 10-second exchange.
Yeah, they talk a little bit. She ends up taking his soul. Ariel goes over, grabs the shell that's the source of her power, this conch shell looking thing. That's the source of Ursula's power that's established during Poor Unfortunate Souls. And then she gets her voice back and she goes like, "Hey, if I destroy this, you'll die." And she goes, "No, that won't happen." And then so she destroys it. In the script, it literally says, Ariel throws the shell off stage, breaking it. We don't see it break. We just have to assume it's been broken. And then Ursula goes, "Ah," and she dies, disappears into, I believe it's described as she disintegrates into ink, is what it says in the script. So Flotsam and Jetsam then go, "Oh, no." And then Triton's like, "Oh, you saved me. You know what? Thanks for that. I'll let you go be with that human boy you like so much." And then it ends. That's kind of where it ends.
No. It drags on for 5 more minutes while we sing more lovey-dovey ballads.
That's true. They sing the finale.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is the most disappointing change in this entire show. You could, make Eric fight Ursula somehow. Something. Do something else. Like, the Triton exchange thing still should kind of happen because it's part of the movie. But then, like, I don't know. I guess having Ariel destroy Ursula is, like, poetic in some way, but it's so dull and anticlimactic. Like, the way that I look at this, like, Ursula could have accidentally dropped that shell at some point and it got crushed, and then she just dies. Is this a Deus Ex Machina of this show? It's like, oh, all of a sudden this shell is the source of her power, and then it gets destroyed and she dies? Is that what this is? It's
not really a Deus Ex Machina because it's set up earlier, but...
Sure.
It's a really bad example of a Chekhov's gun. I think it's more of a girl power thing where they were like, wouldn't it be great if Ariel saved herself?
But then, like, I think it's more impactful if Eric finally realizes, oh, this is who I'm looking for, and he goes himself to save her.
Well,
that makes more sense to me.
That's kind of what happens, right? Like, all the girls sing, and then he's like, no, it's not any of them. And then she's like, I can't sing, but I'll dance. And then he's like, yep, I love her anyway. I'm going to marry her even though it's not the voice. And then the voice happens, and he's like, oh, yeah, the voice. It's like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Which is it, buddy? And then Fred would be like, oh yeah, this octopus monster has climbed out of the ocean and somehow into your castle without anyone noticing, and drags her back into the ocean just long enough for us to change her costume back to her freaking mermaid costume, and then we can change her back to her Also, that production we watched, that princess costume that she had on, she looked like a McDonald's. She was red and yellow. I hate it. I thought they were trying to
put her back in the pink dress.
I thought they were trying to play on all the Disney princesses. I saw the yellow dress and I was like, oh, it's Belle. Like, oh, it's this, and it's like, oh no, it's just.
But there was already someone in a yellow dress.
You look like French fries with ketchup.
Yeah. No. Jeez. We won't talk about that specific production because I had a lot of issues.
Yeah.
But no. Anyway, but it's so anticlimactic. The stage version, I can't get over like how I'm like, look, I get there's certain things they can't do, but like, try. You're Disney theatrical. You can do literally anything. You have like a well full of money. Okay, do something.
Yeah, it resolved way too quickly. Like, to be like, oh, Ursula's back and kidnapped, and so now we'll go down. I'm sure in the script that scene is like 1 page long. It's
like 2 pages.
Oh, okay. Well, it's because it's double spaced, right?
Yeah.
Is there a song in there?
Here is what happens. There's a very short reprise of Poor Unfortunate Souls.
That's what takes.
And then she sings the part to get her voice back. And then she's like, if I destroy this shell, you'll die. She goes, no, that's not going to happen. She's like, nope, that's not true. You believe everything he told you? And she goes, breaks it anyway. And then she goes, ah! And then she explodes into a...
Yeah, I think we needed to set up Ursula more as a... what am I trying to say? We need to set up Ursula as having a better relationship with Ariel if you want that to work.
Right.
If there were more lines in the script in Act 1 that kind of establish their relationship and like Ursula trying to get Ariel to trust her and like
maybe kind of
putting a wedge between her and Triton, and like that's the only way that would work. Like it's like 3 lines later she's like, oh, I took your dad's soul, never mind, I saved him, time to get married.
Yeah. Yeah, Act 1 is so solid. Act 2 has some really big highlights, but this end is just bad. There's no other way around it. The ending is just, for this show, is just bad. And I feel like maybe that's why it didn't, I mean, it did okay. It's not been as successful as the other Broadway productions so far. Mm-hmm. I mean, Lion King has been really successful. Aladdin has been really successful. Frozen ran for a while, so I feel like maybe that's kind of why it didn't do as well, because the end literally just kind of fizzles out.
Did it? Did it flounder?
I hate you. I hate you.
But
now I'm upset for a different reason. So Frozen did run longer. It was 825 regular performances versus Little Mermaid's 685. And the only reason Frozen closed was because of the pandemic.
Right.
I think it would have ran for a little bit longer had that not been the case. But
I think so.
I mean, I think this has been Disney's most successful, least successful, most successful musical adaptation that they've made. Because obviously the least successful has been Tarzan, and we'll talk about that at some other point in time.
Tarzan. I want to talk about one of my bullet points here, my last big bullet point.
Okay.
Is titled, "Is this my favorite Disney musical?" ?
Okay.
And so, preface, Beauty and the Beast was my favorite Disney movie when I was a kid. I wore that tape out. And it was my favorite musical for a while, too. I've seen 7 or 8 different productions of it, definitely more than I've seen any other musical. Mm-hmm. Belle was a dream role of mine for a really long time. It was Beauty of all the musicals, movies or musicals, of my favorite Disney is definitely Beauty and the Beast, or was as a kid. I've never seen a stage version of Beauty and the Beast that really impressed me, including the national tour.
Wow. Okay.
And so I've just come to the conclusion that it works better as a movie than stage, and that's mostly due to the costume requirements.
Sure.
And I think Mermaid falls into the same trap. There's a zillion non-human characters.
Right.
And I just think it's more achievable to do animals and fish and mermaids than singing household objects. To do it and do it well.
Sure.
And so coming into this episode and I've seen The Little Mermaid, I think I've only seen it once live. Mm-hmm. And then, we watched a couple recordings to prepare. I was coming into this thinking I'm going to really enjoy this episode. And especially looking at it through an educational theater lens. Because most of the musicals that I'm going to do at this point are probably going to be stuff that we produce at school. Mm-hmm. I was just thinking this could be a good choice potentially. I mean, I would want to wait a while since we just had a nearby school do it recently.
Right.
But I made a chart. I'm going to screen share with you. I think if I can make it work.
Oh, okay.
So I made a chart that's a side-by-side of the characters in the characters in The Little Mermaid versus characters in Beauty and the Beast. Mm-hmm. And so I think the highlighted ones are really pretty much one-to-one compliments. They're the same character.
Sure.
So obviously Ariel and Belle, and then Prince Eric and the Beast, they're the similar types of characters, similar types of songs. Right. I think Sebastian and Lumiere are probably your showstopper, non-human. Wait, hold on. There was phrasing I had in my brain for this. Your charismatic, flamboyant, non-human tenor who sings the Big Act 1 showstopper in an accent.
Sure.
Yeah.
One's French, one's just Jamaican. I get you.
One is French. Yeah, one's Jamaican. I think Grimsby and Cogsworth and King Triton and Maurice, I think you could swap those either way.
Sure.
Right now I have them as Grimsby and Cogsworth being analogous just because they don't sing as much.
Yeah.
I don't believe Cogsworth sings as much as Maurice in the stage show, although I think they cut Maurice's song in Act 1 recently. But anyway, I think 2 of them are dads and 2 of them are
right.
mentor figures, whatever, either way. And then Flounder and Chip. But
Right.
then you get into some of the other characters. So Mrs. Potts and Ursula are not analogous characters.
No, not even a little bit.
I mean, I guess if you have your Ariel is probably your Belle. And then if you have a strong female performer, like, who could be Mrs. Potts, like, they're probably going to be Ursula. But those are not the same type of characters at all.
No, not even a little
And their
bit.
vocal demands are very different.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, Ursula and Gaston are the villains.
Right.
Those aren't analogous to each other. I mean, I guess, like, Flotsam and Jetsam are kind of the substitute for LeFou, but there's two of them.
Right.
And then you've got this, like, supporting leads in Beauty and the Beast, who's, again, I said I've seen the show more than any other one. It was my favorite musical for a long time. I can't remember the names of the wardrobe or the feather duster.
So the wardrobe is garderobe, is the wardrobe.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, garderobe is the wardrobe, and
the musical?
and the feather duster is Babette.
Babette. Okay, yes, I do remember that.
I pulled that out of my butt. I didn't even pulled up. I just was looking.
The Murr sisters and the maids and the princesses on Broadway were played by the same 6 performers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess you could split those roles out if you need to feature more girls.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Scuttle and Chef Louie, who are both featured characters who don't have who don't have a comparable character in Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Yeah. I mean, because, like, even thinking about this in terms of, like, comparing it even to, like, the other successful Disney one, Lion King, it's similar, but there's also a lot of flipping because your Ariel/Belle would be Simba. Your Prince Eric or Beast is probably going to be Nala. Your side character who you'd have that's, like, has a big show-stopping number is going to be Timon and Pumbaa. It's both of them, right? Mm-hmm. Your mentor-type character that doesn't really sing, there really isn't one. Maybe Zazu, but Zazu has at least one song. Mm-hmm. Your King Triton Maurice is going to be Mufasa. Your Flounder Chip, there's maybe Kid Simba and Kid Nala. That's the only thing. Like, it's analogous. I feel like they're just the kid role in the show. Your Ursula and Gaston, it's going to be Scar. And then your Flotsam Jetsam or LeFou is going to be 3 hyenas. You know, one of which does not sing. I don't think because there's Shinzi, Banzai, and Ed. I don't believe Ed sings. He's the one that makes all, like, the laughing noises. And then, like, you're like, then there's no other, like, really on the other, like, side characters in that show that I can think of. There's no, from what Rafiki. That's one. Rafiki, I guess, would kind of be, you know what? Rafiki is probably your mentor type character. So your Grimsby Cogsworth is probably going to be like Rafiki, because Rafiki doesn't only really sings the opening number. And then your Zazu would be like your Scuttle, who just has a featured song. Mm-hmm. I guess, like, just going, off the top of my head with all this. But as far as, like, your ensemble, that's going to be like with your Murr sisters and maids and all that stuff. There's not really anything like that other than just people playing random animals in Lion King, so
I'm struggling a lot because I really, looking at it, I think it is there's a reason it's number 5
right
most produced high school musical.
Mm-hmm.
It has the name recognition, it has a big featured cast, it puts butts in seats. I get it. And I was really, I was ready to come in and be like, yeah, Little Mermaid is the best Disney theatrical show. But I'm like, there's a lot of flaws. And I think some of the flaws are that there are too many characters. We're trying to feature too many of them. I think you could probably cut Scuttle.
Well, not cut Scuttle all the way, but, like, have him there, but...
I think people only want Scuttle for the sentimentality. They're like, oh, but Scuttle's in the movie. You know who else doesn't do anything for the plot? Flounder.
Yeah.
Sebastian in Act 1.
Yeah.
Like they don't do anything, so you don't need them. You just need them because your audience wants to see Scuttle.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I get that. I get what you're saying.
So I honestly, Scuttle would be the first one I would cut to try to fix the problems, and I would pull Flotsam and Jetsam back even more.
Yeah,
and that would save some time.
Mm-hmm. Well, earlier I mentioned to you that I had production ideas for this.
Yeah. As you're getting to this segue, I will say, like, there's a reason that they're tied on that list. As we just said, like, there's a lot of characters that sub one for the other. And I think, at least in my opinion, Beauty and the Beast is probably more beloved as a movie. But I think they have equal recognizability. and they are, they're equally produced. So I feel like if you have lots of talented kids that you're trying to feature and you don't know which one to choose, probably The Little Mermaid is the better choice.
I think I'd agree with that.
I think I would do that before Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. But if you have like a really good ensemble, I think this is a show you'd want to pick. But if you have like one or two kids that are like really good and everyone else is kind of okay, then I would not pick Little Mermaid.
No. One problem, I don't know where this is in my notes. I put it somewhere. I think the reason, this is kind of backtracking a little bit. I think the reason Daddy's Little Angel or I Want the Good Times Back is I don't think it's necessary. That's another thing I would cut immediately. I think it's there because every other lead character besides Ariel is male.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah.
And so, I mean, while I've seen many a production with a female performer as Flounder and Scuttle, like, there are way too many male characters.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose that's true. I could see why that's your argument there. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me why that would be there in that case. To just keep the old song, ditch the new one. That's where I'm at.
Right.
Anyway, so
your production ideas.
So my production ideas for this. I think that the costumes for this can be really good or really bad.
Agreed.
And what I think I would lean more towards puppets for a lot of the non-human characters, like specifically Flotsam and Jetsam and Flounder. It's weird to think about this, but I honestly think Sebastian works just fine the way he is, despite the fact that of the 4 characters I just listed, he's the smallest. But I think Sebastian works just fine as a human, more human character. But Flounder, I think you could make into a puppet. And Flotsam and Jetsam, I think you could do a lot with puppets. But I also feel that because it's hard to make people that are walking on a stage look like they're swimming, you need to essentially have a puppeteer per performer to help move tails or move tentacles in a way that makes it look believable to me. Like, I've seen the costumes, I get how they work, but and I know this would be a lot, right? And I would say really only for the main cast. Like, you'd have Ariel and then a puppeteer for Ariel's tail, Triton, a puppeteer for Triton, Ursula, and probably 2 or 3 to move all the tentacles around. And then everyone else could more or less be in a costume because those puppeteers are probably also going to double as other ensemble members, doing other things. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what I think I would lean more into that direction, just because one of my biggest things is that Flotsam and Jetsam are electric eels. It's really hard to make a person look like an eel and it not look dumb. Mm-hmm. And granted, I've seen the Broadway costumes and they're all great. I just feel like in some respects it'd be easier to do puppets for some characters but not for all of them. And that kind of, for me, it feels very similar to when I think about The Lion King, Zazu is a puppet. Now there's a performer who's got face makeup on and wearing a costume that also has this puppet, but it's a puppet. Zazu himself is a puppet. And same thing with Timon. Timon is a puppet, but Pumbaa is more of a wearable. He's like a wearable puppet, right? So I think if you kind of go more that direction, it makes more sense to me for that than it does to not, specifically because they are all underwater, right? And now I also think if you're going to do this show, you should have a fly system in which you are able to fly people. I think that's really important for this show because it's hard to do Ariel's ascension to the surface if you don't have that.
That's interesting because I don't feel that way at all.
You don't feel that way at all? I think it adds a lot more to it than if you don't do it.
I think it's fun if you can. And the production we watched, Scuttle also flew a bunch. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's fun. But I don't think not flying Ariel detracts from the show at all. I think you can do some fun lighting tricks and just isolate her.
Yeah.
It doesn't. That actually doesn't bother me at all.
Well, here's the thing though too, is if you have puppeteers or ensemble, maybe you do a thing where you just kind of lift her up and kind of move her around, over your head, as opposed to having her fly right out.
Yeah.
You put everyone else in black and you just light her, and she's just kind of moving around trying to quote unquote swim to the surface. There's ways you could do it. I just personally feel that having some puppets would elevate the production to in a specific way versus having just everyone in costumes. But I also understand if people were like, well, you need to have everyone needs to be a puppet or everyone needs to be in costume. I get that argument as well. I just don't think that it really detracts that much from it, right? And like, because I've seen like I said, this production that we both watched, a lot of the sea creatures had very elaborate face paint as part of their costume, and some of these kids are getting like, well, it was a high school production that we saw. They're having to get in and out of this really elaborate face paint. That's a huge pain to do that, right? So if you use more puppets, you kind of can get away from that to a certain extent, right? Now, and I know it's very popular because I think that the original Flounder on Broadway had Heelys on, and it kind of like helped make that character look like they were flowing. I think most of the actors kind of had wheeled shoes of some kind to glide around more than walk, which is fine, and I understand that usage too. And I still think that could still be utilized. I just think that having puppets would just help. Again, they're underwater. They would technically be suspended in what we would call midair, on the surface world. And they're kind of suspended. They're just floating around, right? So for me, that makes more sense. But I get not doing that as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go for Heelys if I were to direct this. I think I'm going to save my roller skating show for Xanadu. And Starlight Express if I want to scare the kids. But I don't know if I would do it. I don't know. Actually, I wasn't going to talk about this, but since we're talking about costumes, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the mermaid tails.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that she's walking on her own legs and then she also has a tail.
Yeah. I get that what they're going for in the visual. That's why I'm saying I would rather have someone like, obviously you're not going to not see her legs, right? Mm-hmm. Unless you're going to literally fly everyone like 4 feet off the ground for this entire show, which doesn't sound fun or easy. So unless you're going to do that, it doesn't really bother me, suspension of disbelief. It doesn't really bother me that much. But that's why I'm also like, well, if you had the costume with the tail and someone's operating the tail separately from the actor, right? Mm-hmm. Then I feel like that's a little more believable than if they're not. Because like the tails are stationary. They don't move. They're just kind of like they swoop off their butt and it just kind of like is there. But they walk around and it's kind of malleable in the way that like, it moves a bit and maybe it will like flap with air movement, but it doesn't give the impression of like a mermaid tail. It just gives an impression of like a tail, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I think if you were to make them in a way to where they were more movable in that respect, and when the actor is walking, I don't think it's that much of a distraction, if that makes sense. Like I don't know if I'm making any sense as I'm talking about this.
You are.
Okay. But I just feel like, fish don't just sit, their tails don't just sit there when they swim, right? They move them around. Their fins and everything, it moves when they're doing things, when they're moving around. Most fish don't just float and then not move. Right? Mm-hmm. So in that's why I'm thinking if you're going to have the mermaid tail, you should have someone who can like operate the tail and it doesn't have to be like flopping around like rapidly, because that wouldn't make sense. It's not realistic, right? But just to have someone just kind of subtly move it around a little bit as like she's sitting there, because that's what would happen, right? At least I think so anyway.
Yeah. Well, and if you watch videos of Sierra Boggess performing, she does the thing with her arms like she's treading water. Mm-hmm. She does. It's very subtle, but if you're like, oh yeah, she's a mermaid, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I hate the tails. I'm sure you knew that as soon as I asked you the question. But the fact
pretty much, yeah.
That she's got a full skirt that goes all the way down to her feet and then an additional tail that comes off of her butt kind of makes her look like a mermaid centaur to me.
Yeah, I could see that.
And I can't not see it. I think the tail needs to be like mounted a lot lower. Like you can have the length. It doesn't bother me that the tail would be super long. But I think the tail needs to come off of like her calves for me to believe that like this is all one body. Or just don't give her the tail. I know she's a person in a mermaid costume.
Yeah.
Like your electric eels are in bodysuits with like colored spots on them, and I know that they're eels. I know she's the Little Mermaid. It's in the title. Like, just give her a Little Mermaid skirt, and I'll buy it.
Well, it bothers me more that the tail and the skirt are the same color. Mm-hmm. Now, if the tail was one color and the skirt was another, meaning like if the skirt was blue, if the skirt she's wearing is blue, so it looks like water, and then the tail is like the color of Ariel's tail, I'm more likely to believe that.
I think, yeah, I would like to see what that would look like if her actual, like the performer's legs were covered in a material that was meant to blend in with the environment, whether that was black or blue or whatever, to blend in with the set. I wonder if my eye would get used to that enough to believe that she was like treading water as a mermaid and not as a person in a weird costume. Right. But also, now I need to go back and see, did King Triton have a mermaid tail too on Broadway? Or
I'm not sure.
Did all of the girls have to wear the stupid tail and he
No, I think Triton did. I think he would have. Also, as a side note, every time I type in Little Mermaid into Google, I always type in Littler, and I'm annoyed by it.
The Littler Mermaid?
The Littler Mermaid.
It's the sequel.
Yeah.
King Triton finds love again, and Ariel has a new half-sister.
It looks like he does.
Oh, his tail's not as stupid as hers.
Oh, here's a stage production where they did Ariel, but she's wearing a mermaid dress, like the skinny, and then it flares out at the bottom.
Well, and that's kind of what our nearby school did, and I thought it was fine. All of the Mer sisters were kind of like they were more covered than the Broadway production or like the cartoon where it's just like seashell bikini. Like they kind of played with the same colors, but it was like they were totally covered, and then they had these long mermaid cut skirts, and I thought they worked really well. Mm-hmm. Oh, Norm Lewis, what a man!
All right, I'm gonna watch this thing you sent me.
Okay, if you jump ahead to like 35 seconds, that's where he comes in, and you can just see his costume really quick.
Yeah, his isn't as dumb.
Right?
Yeah. I think having the mermaid, like the mermaid style dress, I think is totally fine. It's kind of harder to move in because I've seen those dresses. I've not worn one, but I've seen how they work and all that. And that's kind of what Ursula has in her costume. It's kind of like a black sequency looking mermaid style dress with tentacles that come off the back of it.
I mean, if you're in Heelys, you don't really need to move your legs that much, right?
No, I suppose it's true.
You're just kind of wheeling around. I've never worn Heelys. I don't know. As we were preparing for this, I was imagining directing a production of this with Heelys, and just knowing that like when I sent home materials in my performance contract, you'd have to be like, please provide helmet and knee pads and elbow pads until your child can operate Heelys reliably.
Yeah.
Because knowing our kids, there would be several head injuries. Probably in the first 10 minutes.
And that's even before the Heelys. So,
Yeah. We love you, but you're clumsy.
Yeah, jeez.
Take a dance class.
Coordination does not exist. Hey, if you're listening,
take ballet.
Take literally anything. Why is it you can do these TikTok dances perfectly, but you struggle to do simple choreography in simple shows? I don't understand. And that's not just our students. That's all high school students. Also, get your friends that do dance to come audition for shows, please.
Right. They're in my classes. They just won't audition.
Jeez. Yeah, we had a few of those.
You know who you are.
Yep. You better.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any other talking points?
I don't have any more talking points. I just know that the Little Mermaid always just the movie in general hits very close to home for me. It is my wife's favorite Disney Disney movie of all time. She wore her VHS tape out of this one when you wore out Little Beauty and the Beast. She wore out this one.
Yeah.
I believe her mom told me they had at least 2 copies of it somewhere.
Really?
Yeah, just because they had to. Because my wife would just watch this over and over and over again when she was little.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have Ariel themed stuff in our house right now. We have mermaid themed stuff in our house right now because of her a love of this movie and this show. So, and in case anyone out there is wondering, we intentionally didn't really talk about anything that has come out past this, just because we wanted to keep it more relevant, because the Broadway, the stage musical is specifically based off of the original animated film. So we didn't really want to talk anything past that, just because we didn't want to trying to talk about all things Little Mermaid would take us much, much longer than what it currently is right now.
We've already been here for about 3 hours.
Right. So we would be here much, much longer if we did.
I don't know if you have. I haven't seen the new movie, and I don't know if or when I will.
I have not.
I don't have anything against it. I just haven't seen it.
I have not either. And it was just because I'm just tired of Disney remaking the same movies over and over again, and I just don't want to support that kind of behavior. It's what's the definition of insanity? If you do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. Except in this case, they're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results, and it's not happening. So, we could talk about some of the movies. Like, I thought Beauty and the Beast was fine. I didn't particularly care for Emma Watson. I think Aladdin is the best live action one that they've done. I think Will Smith is great, despite the fact that he slapped a man on public television. On all the actors in that are great. I thought Lion King was kind of boring just because the real animal faces are not expressive like animated animal faces. So Lion King just didn't do it for me. And after that, I watched Mulan, which is not a musical in any way. And Pete's Dragon originally is a musical, then the remake is not. So I'm like, I don't know why you're taking a non-musical and making it worse. A musical and making it into a non-musical, because that just makes it worse. So I don't know. I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to support that kind of behavior. Nothing against the people that worked on that show or worked on that film. And apparently it's doing well without me, so I'm not too worried about it. So, there's people in it that I like. Halle Bailey's great. I really like Daveed Diggs, I like Melissa McCarthy a lot. Is it McCartney? McCarthy.
McCarthy?
Or McCartney. It's McCarthy. McCarthy. I really like Melissa McCarthy. And so nothing against any of the people that are working on this. I just don't have interest in seeing it, and I probably won't. If I do, it'll be at home on Disney Plus at some point in the far future. Yeah. But I did watch, I will say, the Little Mermaid live that they did, which was kind of a ripoff because it wasn't actually live. It was like, we're going to play the animated film and then all the songs are live. And I'm like, that's not the same thing. I didn't particularly care for that. I think Ali'i Kalvaharo, who sang the Ariel songs.
Yeah, I was excited about that until I found out what it was.
Yeah. But Ali'i Kalvaharo, she was great. Shaggy's a weird choice for Sebastian. They sing a couple of Prince Eric songs. I don't even know if they're from this show or if they were written new. I honestly don't remember. I've only seen it once. But Queen Latifah was Ursula, and she was incredible. So I wasn't mad about that.
I bet she was really good.
She was great, yeah.
Oh, we didn't Dreamcast this yet.
We have not Dreamcast this show. Honestly, I don't even know if I want to, because the cast in the show is so solid already. There's not a way we can make it better.
I don't think we need to Dreamcast it, but I do want to mention who was attached to the show originally.
Okay.
So apparently, when the show was very early in concept phases, Carrie Butler was Ariel.
Really? Okay.
Emily Skinner was Ursula. And Gavin Creel was Prince Eric.
Ooh.
I know. I'm kind of into all of that.
Wow. I mean, that honestly wouldn't have been terrible, I don't think.
I think that's cool.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they said happened, but it was in talks very much earlier, and then it got put aside for something else. And then when they came back to it, they had a new cast. I think that's The Little Mermaid.
So yeah, I think that's it. Feels pretty good to me.
Would you like to rate The Little Mermaid on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think I'd give The Little Mermaid, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 just because the ending is so bad. And some of the changes are good, some of the changes are meh. But the ending is the biggest offender for me. I'm going to give it a 7. What about you?
I agree. I would also give it a 7. I think the biggest problem with the show is that it's pacing issues.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we look at things through an educational theater lens so much just because we are theater educators. So when I'm looking at shows, I'm like, if it's a perfect show or if it's very well done, that makes it easier for my amateur performers who are maybe in their first musical or stage production ever,
Mm-hmm.
having, never taken a class or done anything. I need a very well put together book to elevate their performance.
For
make
sure.
things easier for them.
Yeah.
And if I'm depending on my skills as a director and then their skills as performers to fix or at least do the show as best they can, and there are already pacing issues, then I'm scared it's going to drag. So I honestly, this is not off the table for me.
Sure.
At some point, maybe in a decade or so, we'll consider this
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great.
as something that we might do, but it is flawed.
For sure.
So I think it's a 7.
Great.
But I really want to like it more than I do. I think my analytical brain is getting in the way too much and seeing all the problems. And if I were just a Disney fan and not a musical theater person, I think maybe I would love this.
Yeah, maybe. But I am a Disney fan and a musical theater person. And I think it's fun. I really like it. I think some of the things that they've done are creative and how they've tried to get away with the whole how 60% of this movie's underwater. 70% of it, So I think they did a good job with that. Ursula is up there, like I said, of one of the best Disney villains, and they just did her dirty by who she disintegrates into ink.
She also has to sing Daddy's Little Angel twice, which I would argue is worse. I would rather just disintegrate into
Can we
ink
sing
than
Poor
sing
Unfortunate
that song
Souls 3
twice.
times? Let's do that.
The other song that what is it? I Want the Good Times Back?
Yeah, I Want the
Is
Good
that what
Times
it's
Back.
called?
Yeah. That song's
sounds way
great.
better.
Yeah, it's better. So if you are out there and you are Alan Menken, put that song back in the show.
Yeah, so students, if you're listening, maybe in 10 years. So when you're gone.
Yeah.
Huh.
Tweet at Alan Menken and tell him to put this song. I want
tell
the
them to
good
put that song
back
back
in the show.
And I'll think about it sooner.
Yeah. Works for me.
It's the Greatest Show, Man is produced by Brantley Wheeler and Emily Chavone. Our theme song is by Patrick Duffy. All of his information will be listed in the episode description. You can find us all over social media at Greatest Show Pod. Tweet at Brantley, tell him why he's wrong and has horrible taste in musicals. If you have suggestions for a musical we should cover in the future, please send us an email at thegreatestshowpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah, Shaggy is also a weird choice for Sebastian because he just does him there you see her sitting there across the way. I'm not a fan of that. Just saying, he sounds like Stitch. Anyway, I like Shaggy and other things, but not as Sebastian.
Oh, that is the end tag of this episode.
my Shaggy impression.
Brantley does, Shaggy does Sebastian.
Mr. Lova Lova.